Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm going to keep going unless someone tells me otherwise, and that you can see some slides. One of
Yep.
the joys of having over the last few months put a huge effort in turning Phrase into a very AI native business, and I'd be very happy to talk about that. We're doing some incredible, crazy things. Hundreds of agents running around the business, writing production code, reviewing PRs, and doing many things around the go-to-market side of things as well. But anyway, one of the wonderful things about that is that I now write most of my slides by asking Claude to review the context of recent conversations, recent meetings, and so on. So I don't write any more of my own slides. It's like the engineers don't write prompts, they write loops. And as a CEO, I used to write all my own slides. Now I don't. And the nice thing about that is it's anchored to ground truth. So everything you see here was produced just from a few prompts asking to go out and kind of anchoring ground truth across our business. So I'm going to try and take us through three areas, and then would love to take some questions as well. I can see the chat just on one side. I'm just going to open the Q&A window here as well. So if people want to drop any questions in chat or Q&A, if I can't address them as I go along, I'll try and address them at the end. And what I'm hoping to do is to share some perspectives that are interesting, grounded in practical reality, but also hopefully a little bit thought-provoking and maybe spicy. I don't know, try and make it a bit more interesting. So I hope the questions will come back in the same way. And one of the reasons I do things like this is actually to interact. And actually, I think I'm at my best not when I'm monologuing, but when I'm interacting with people. So I would love to take questions, and look, if they're beyond my capability to answer them, I'll just say this. So but otherwise I'll do my best. So yeah, three areas that I want to talk about: commodity trap, the model isn't with the moat or where the value really is, and then the potential to upgrade the role of localization inside our businesses. So commodity trap, there's research there now that tells us something I think a lot of us know but aren't always comfortable to acknowledge, which is that the cost of translation is dropping through the floor and will effectively become entirely commoditized. The value that we provide as an industry is not in translation and localization. And actually, the provocative statement I made to start with, and I said this at conferences over the last few weeks, is I think we actually need to stop defining ourselves and stop using the language of translation and localization. I think when we go into a room and we talk about translation and localization, we lose the room because people see this as a solved problem. They have a great translation experience on their iPhone, and they think it scales from the iPhone. An engineer built something in a weekend. It looks okay. As one of my customers said to me, the engineers will come in and say, it looks like Spanish. And of course, if like me, you don't speak Spanish, okay, well, it looks like Spanish. So the problem is that decision makers inside businesses are not as expert and never will be, and don't care to be, as we are in our field, right? And so it's very important that we have to have the humility, I think, as an industry to acknowledge that we can lose the room very quickly when we talk about translation and localization. And I'll extend that even more provocatively in a moment. So look, I think we have spent a long time as an industry optimizing for what was the right thing at the time, but may just be the wrong thing now, right? Which is volume and cost per word. This may have been right at the time, but I don't think it's the right thing to focus on today, because it's not really where the value is. The value isn't in just like reducing the cost. If we as an industry are so focused on reducing the cost per word of everything that we provide, then we're commoditizing ourselves. We're turning ourselves into a cost item. And you know what business leaders do to cost line items? They try and reduce them to zero as much as possible. And so I think that really misses the value that we bring. We know we bring it, right? As an industry, we have an opportunity to be more confident, I think, more bold, to talk about the transformation that we can apply to content. So when I'm asked what we do, I say, ours is a company, one of the leading companies in the world of what we do. And what we do is we help global brands very recognizable brands to transform their content for a global audience. Because how you sell a hotel room to a business traveler is different to how you sell a hotel room to an elderly couple in one language, let alone when you apply 50 different language and cultural contexts on top. And so we can provide, and we the industry, we can provide value in one language and then compound that value across cultures, demographic intersections of age, race, gender, religious affiliation, cultural affiliation, interests, previous purchase history, and so on and so on. So I think there's a window open now to reposition what we do. And the value is in the context. And like everyone is slowly learning this, because for the last 6 months intensely, but even for the previous 2 years before that, slightly less intensely, it's been a huge focus on the models. And like the model is where the value is going to be, and the models can solve these problems. And what we all know, we being people who have played extensively with these models until 2 o'clock in the morning and pick them up off the floor when they break and then fix them again and again and again. We know the models are not the solution. It's the context around the model. It's the harness around the model. So that is something that we have to focus on. It's not about volume and cost per word. It's about intelligence and context. So this is where I said I was going to expand the spicy or provocative statement. I think when we go into a room as translation and localization people, and we talk about quality, we lose the room again. And this is tough to sort of internalize, I think. And I said this at Lockworld, and people, half the room was nodding and half the room looked a bit sort of shocked. And it was interesting, right? And this is a bit more nuanced, right? Quality and quality metrics have a place, but I just think we need to reframe how we talk about this, because when we go in and we talk about quality, it's like an engineer going to the CEO and talking about beautiful code. The CEO doesn't care. They just want you to ship. They don't care how beautiful the code is. They just want the business outcomes. So what I'd like to suggest is that as an industry, we need to think more about winning the game we're in by the rules of the game that we're playing. So if the game is selling stuff, is our content selling stuff? If the game is educating a population because we're a government agency, is the population engaging with our content and do they understand it? If the aim of the game is to warn people because we're a 0-day vulnerability announcement from a major antivirus company, then are we warning people? Do they get it? And it's got nothing to do with blur and comet and tur and edit distance and all the other sort of quality stuff, which is frankly academic. It's not practical. The business doesn't care about that stuff. So this might be a bit more nuanced. It's not that like you can put out content that is poor, but it's just define poor by the outcome that the content was intended to achieve. And we'll talk about intention in a little bit as well. So the model isn't the moat. And I think this is really, really important. The model companies would have you believe that, of course, it is the moat, but even they, right? We see today Claude just introduced this new capability to use it in Slack. Why? Because Slack is the company context layer. So in a sense, now this is becoming very clear. Context is king. There was a phenomenal study, very interesting, written in March. This is relatively recent, which academically proved that the harness that you put around a model can improve the output of the model by up to 6 times, which is amazing, right? You can take the best model in the world and then get a 6 times better output if you put the right context around it, the right memory, the right guardrails, the right definitions of done. And of course, this is also why and where and how companies and brands differentiate from one another. If you have Nike, Adidas, Puma, and Reebok all using the same model and all sounding the same, it's a disaster. So how do they sound different? Well, they build a different harness around it, have a different context. So this is also a very valuable insight, because what it means is that as the models themselves improve, as you improve the quality of the fuel you put into the machine, then the whole machine will perform better and better. So the models don't kind of swallow up and overcome the whole infrastructure that you put around it. The infrastructure itself benefits from the underlying model, but continues to evolve and produce value on top of those models. So what do we mean by harness? A few things. We talk about capturing the intention. What is the outcome that the content is intended to achieve? And again, with the same source content or even source-less content, you can have very different intentions, and you can drive very different transformations according to the audience that it's being directed at, right? The personalization concept. A company can have glossaries and style guides and translation memories and all of these things, but it can also start to stack these on top of one another. So you could have a company level style guide and then a regional one and a brand specific one under that, and then a product one under that. You stack all of these things, and then you can start to think about the weighting between the layers. And we have a name for that, which I'll come to. Quality, as I said, it's not binary pass fail. It's much more nuanced. It's scored. It's adaptive, which is really important, which goes to the final point around adaptation and closing the loop. So like measuring the outcomes, well, firstly, inputting the desired outcomes, then measuring the actual outcomes, and then driving that content improvement cycle so content measurably improves over time, and you build value in the system. If any of you, like me, have been playing extensively with Claude and trying to build, I've been trying to build a second brain, sort of LLM wiki into it. It has 18,000 pages in it now. It grows over time, but it's a huge effort. You have to sort of continuously harvest and mine and clean up, and then pick up when it falls over and reconnect when it disconnects, all these different things. But when it works, when you get that loop working very well, it's an extraordinary experience. My own setup is Hermes agentic runtime using Claude with GBrain. If you look it up, Gary Tan, GBrain as a second brain LLM wiki kind of concept. And you put that all together, Telegram on top. I have different agents acting as development team, social media strategist, personal assistant, all these things. Like, it's the context over time when it gets to know you. It's a transformative experience. The same thing is true in these harnesses. So we have 4 product imperatives, we call them, at Freights. And this slide I actually created in 2 minutes before coming on stage. So I'm reading it for the first time along with you, but this is drawn directly from our internal sources. And there's a longer blog that I wrote a couple of weeks ago. You can find it phrase.com. If you go to the resources section on the website, and you can find my blog. It's quite long, but it talks about a big transformation we've been driving at the company internally, about how we use AI, which is like very, very heavy. We have every intention of being the most AI-pilled business in Europe, not the most AI-pilled localization business, even language business, right? But in any industry. And the blog talks about these 4 product imperatives. So they're really 2 reinforcing loops. So headless and guided are the first 2 loops. Headless, I think people know generally what that means. It's exposing capabilities through APIs, MCP, command line interface, and so on. What it actually interestingly doesn't say on here, and should, is that I also see headless as a distribution model for the value that localization teams can provide. So today, I can't see you as an audience, but I'm going to imagine I can see you and ask the question, put your hands up if you've ever been in that position where you find yourself like running after the business saying, don't do shadow localization, don't use that other tool. We've got a great process. We've got a great team. We've got some software. We've got some assets. Please work with us. We can help you, pull us in upstream, right? I mean, I'm sure that resonates with people in the audience. And so the unfortunate thing is it sort of relegates us a little bit to a bit of a compliance function, right? And like please comply with this company standard. The problem is business people, broadly speaking, don't like compliance, right? Business people, broadly speaking, are pragmatists, impatient, don't love to be told no or slow down, and they will take the shortest path. It's like water. It'll take sort of the shortest path to getting something done. And if that is going online or pressing the little translate button in their new bit of software that they're using, then that's what they'll do. So headless, I think, is a really interesting distribution concept for the value that a localization team can provide, because now you can build all that central infrastructure and quality control and all the terminology and like memory style guides, all of that stuff but you can then enable the business to be a consumer of that without them even knowing they are a consumer of that. So they no longer have to follow a process and fill in a form. They can just use whatever application they're using in the way they normally use it, and then it will flow headlessly through the language infrastructure and back to them. So now suddenly you as a localization team aren't playing compliance anymore. You're just adding value and you're doing it to everybody, and you can spend a lot less time chasing around. So I think this as a distribution model is really interesting. The guided experience, we talk here about, on the one hand, it being like a text-based chat interface across the top of the platform. Fine. Okay, interesting, but like not game-changing. More interesting, we start to bring in visual artifacts from our design library and bring workflows and tables and graphs and analytics into that same experience. So that's more interesting. Most interesting here is the opportunity for the intelligence behind this to be proactive. So, you know, dear user, you asked me to do X. I can do X, but I can also do X more cheaply, or I can do X like better and for a bit more cost. Other people in your company have added this. Actually, the feedback from consumers is that if you optimize in a slightly different way, you'll get a better outcome. Like that sort of proactive intelligence coming back to the user through this interface is something that really excites me a lot. And these two are interesting, right? If you imagine a product like ours, like a planet with a sort of hot core of capability, and then the UX as the sort of bit humanity experiences on the outside. What we're really doing here is reaching down inside and pulling the whole thing inside out, like all that headless exposure, and then exposing all of that through natural interface. Yeah, that's a lot more exciting. And then the cool thing about these two as you build them is that you discover all the APIs you wish you had and you haven't done yet, so you go build those. And where the documentation in your existing APIs isn't as good as you want it to be, so you fix that, and then you use a bunch of agents to do all of this faster and faster and faster. The final thing on these two, I promise the other two are a bit shorter. Final thing on these two, which is really interesting, is this concept of encoding the knowledge. Satya Nadella talks about this, the CEO of Microsoft, how it's so important that companies, all companies, encode the knowledge that they have in the heads of their people, in the experience of all the people, into the software and the models that they run. So we have this amazing group of people who have decades and decades of experience of deploying these technologies at a massive range of companies around the world in lots of industries, and they've touched every edge case you can imagine. And the software with its drop-down menus and its tick boxes today, you know, cannot possibly address all of these edge cases, right? So what we do is we're now and we've been doing this for a couple of months, we've been writing this sort of internal world model, right? If you take the Jack Dorsey concept, this world model of all the edge cases, all the implementations that our forward deployed engineering team have done, and encoding all of those. So then when customers go into something guided like Atlas and they say, hey, I want to do X, it isn't just a case of mechanically like operate the drop-down menus behind the scenes without the user having to do it for themselves, which is nice, but it's actually about taking all of that knowledge and then applying it so that it's almost as if you've got a forward deployed engineer online, like digitally, like the software comes with its own forward deployed engineering. So that's kind of cool. Okay, the other two, I promise more briefly, compounding intelligence. This is this concept that you can apply different transformations to content. And what's interesting is it's not just all the different transformations you can apply, but the metadata that you generate by understanding the weighting. So I overweighted this transformation, I underweighted that transformation, I layered this or I took a layer out. What was the impact of that on my intention? Did I achieve it or not? And then you build a second order model around that intelligence. And that, of course, compounds over time for that particular customer. And that becomes something that like creates a tremendous amount of value over time. And the intent proximity is this sort of getting closer to the objectives, right? Understanding on the way in, this content is intended to inspire, educate, warn, engage, whatever it is. Now metrics are going to be daily active usage, basket rate completion, whatever it is. And then on the way out, capturing that and then putting it back in. So this getting closer to the business intention is important. I also think as a practical matter for localization professionals, if you go to the business and you say, I can help you if I understand your intention, right? It's a it's a different conversation. It's a way of like shifting left as well to say, I need to understand the intention, because you tell me the intention, I'll tell you what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to custom prompt my system. So I need to know your intention. Like, otherwise you get the generic, right? So help me out here, right? I'm going to help you. So intent proximity, I think, is important. So we've got these layers that compound value, and it's an accumulating system. And this is why we've started to call ourselves a language intelligence platform rather than a language technology platform, which I think was already a step in the right direction. The industry does need to evolve its vocabulary from decades old terminologies to describe ourselves, and which also still keep us in a box, right? Like, and keep us in the corner. So we've got to evolve how we describe ourselves. And I think language technology platforms was good. We want to take that to the next level. Again, I think when you talk to business people about language technology, it still evokes too much like solved problem. And it also, they hear technology and they think, can we build that, right? And we know they can't. We know it's difficult. Like, we can have that whole discussion debate in the Q&A or however, but when we talk about intelligence, what we mean is, yes, use of AI, but also it's actionable, right? It's like you can do intelligent things. The system's intelligent. What you do with it is intelligent, and it's about like compounding and building that over time. And actually, there's an important point here in the middle around the ecosystem of third-party tools. This is something I believe in very, very passionately, and as proud as I am of everything that we've built at Phrase and the strength and depth and breadth of our capabilities, I believe very, very strongly that like we should have the humility to understand we operate in a heterogeneous ecosystem where a customer of ours is going to use multiple technologies, oftentimes multiple service providers, and there's good reasons for doing that. And they want to be able to stitch all of those things together. So we need to be a platform, hence language intelligence platform, that customers can build on top of with our rich headless motion, partners can build on top of with integrated solutions. And now those of you that are our customers, as soon as you log in, you literally get like partner solutions on the homepage, and you click a button, you get hundreds of them, and it's integrated, it's visible. We're like actively promoting solutions from partners that even compete with things that we do, because again, there are certain things that we do that will meet many people's needs, and then a partner will come in with a specialist or an improved capability that might be custom technology, custom services, or both. And we want to enable that so the customer is more successful. So I think this is very important, because again, it then enriches the compounding intelligence of the whole system. And this last point, I was posting on LinkedIn the other day, and I realized that I've pinned a video I did in 2023, and it's still up there. And I'm sort of leaving it there deliberately, because I made a prediction then, which, we'll see if it turns out to be right or wrong. But one of the things I've been talking about for a while, and I'm yet to see, let's be honest, I haven't seen this really yet, but I still believe it's a sort of directionally correct prediction, is this concept of layering in real-time data. So political events, weather events, seasonality. I think people feel differently when their local team won the championship to when they came close and lost in the final. I think people feel differently the day after an election when their candidate won or lost. I think they feel differently when it's baking hot outside as it is here, or not. And you can start to see how these types of real-time adaptations could be layered on top of all the demographic stuff we know about our customers. Again, age, race, gender, religious affiliation, cultural nuance, previous purchase history, stated interests, right? If I go to Nike.com, maybe I'm following an athlete, maybe I'm following a sport, maybe I'm interested in the technical specs of a piece of clothing or apparel. So you can know all of that and then layer on top of it this real-time stuff. I think that's part of our future as well. So look, last section, and the role upgrade. It's been called here. So I think I've sort of hinted at a bunch of this stuff, but I think it's about imagining ourselves differently. It's about describing ourselves differently, and I say ourselves for the industry, including ourselves at Phrase. Right? We're not the world's best localization platform, right? We talk about being a leading language intelligence platform. So language, not localization. Language is the programming language of AI. Language is the programming language of people. Language is the emotional connection that we can create with business users and consumers. And if we as a team like really upgrade ourselves, then we avoid being seen as that cost center with the horrible risk of elimination. And I think what localization teams can position themselves as is like orchestrators of this harness, custodians of the AI. How do you apply AI safely? How do you manage drift? Who's going to look after it when the underlying models change and all the weightings need to be recalculated? Who's going to be responsible for the outcomes? And how intelligently are we as a company taking advantage of all of these new capabilities? Are we just saying now that it's engineering? Are we going to give engineering the legal function and finance and sales and tell them just to code it? Or are we going to respect the intersection of technical ability and functional competence, and then in that intersection position ourselves as a language industry, as orchestrators of these harnesses? And then are we also going to build, we at Phrase, it's interesting that the AI has actually pulled out this sentence, automate meaningful parts of their work and share it with the team. So a couple of months ago, I said to our whole company that we were going to define 5 levels of AI fluency, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that everyone in the company had to be at least a level 2 within 90 days. And this is, as it happens, this is the definition of level 2 that we're using. Automate a meaningful part of your work and share it with someone. That's the definition that we're using internally. So it's pulled that into the slide, which is kind of interesting. We call that builder level. And I think, again, this is, not everyone in localization needs to be an engineer. They can partner with engineers. Not everyone in engineering is going to be a localization specialist, but roles everywhere are merging, and we can build empathy and understanding for one another. And we should be building. I mean, there is a whole build versus buy debate. I've said this on stage before, I am the highest spender on tokens at our company. I say that with mixed feelings because I'm also 50% as efficient as our engineers. In other words, I spend twice as many tokens to achieve a pull request as our engineers do, because I'm not an engineer, right? So there's a level of competence and skill I've reached, and there's a level of competence and skill I have yet to reach. But the point is, I believe in building. And so I don't see it as actually a versus or an either or. I think it's a both and you just got to pick the right things and choose what you build on top of. And then finally, if we get this intent proximity right, then we shift left, we talk in business language, and we move from being a reactive cost center to being a crucial dependency for the rest of the business. I'll share an example with one of our customers. This customer actually presented at Lockworld, and now they have 1/3 of global revenue from international markets that they weren't in before. And this is what helped them get there, right? We have an LSP, one of our capabilities that we built. That was the quote they gave. And then we have a company that's massively reduced their customer support. And the thing about these is, it's not, I mean, like every vendor is going to come and tell some success stories. So I'm not majoring on this. We have lots of it. But the point is, it's measured in business outcomes. That's really the key takeaway here. So 2 last slides. Quote here from a very, very large technology business that you have all used, builds hardware, maybe on some of your desks right now. Orchestration is the demand. The models are there, MT's there. It just takes a lot of effort to orchestrate what you're going to use and when, and that's how you generate real value. 3 takeaways. Commodity trap is real. Reposition now. Focus less on driving down, well, let me put a slight nuance on it. Driving down cost per word is important, right? It's just not the whole ball game. It's important because if you know, or if you don't, then look up. And if you want me to explain in the Q&A, I can do that. A thing called Jevons paradox. It's the basic principle is cheaper you make unit economics, the more units people use. And so actually total addressable market grows. So cost per word going down is a good thing. Cost of AI should be going down, except we've got a few IPOs coming up for some of the frontier models. So I don't know if the cost per word is actually going to go down. But the point is, it's not the whole ball game. The ball game is something else entirely, and that's just an enablement. So acknowledge that cost is going down. Focus on the quality, the value that can be created outside of that. The model's not the moat, the harness is, and we need to upgrade ourselves and how we talk, move beyond translation and localization and quality. Thank you. I put my email address. I put a link to the blog, my LinkedIn, X. I try to be very approachable and available. So I would love feedback on what you've heard today. I'd love critique. And if people have any questions, then hopefully we have a bit of time to answer them as well. I don't see any at the moment, but please pop them in if you'd like to.
We are chomping at the bit with questions.
Thank you, Georg. And I love that you said that you perform better when